The dinner plate slipped out of my hand and cracked against the tile floor the moment my son said the words out loud, in front of everyone. "Dad, I know it was you. Where's the $500? I stood there in my own son's kitchen, 68 years old, my hands shaking, and for a second I honestly thought I'd misheard him. Marcus wasn't looking at me like a son looks at his father. He was looking at me like I was a stranger who'd walked in off the street and robbed him blind. "Marcus," I said. "Say that again. Say it again, so I know I heard you right." He didn't back down. He crossed his arms and glanced at his wife, Denise, who wouldn't meet my eyes, and then he said it a second time, slower, like he was talking to someone who couldn't understand simple English. "The envelope with the rent money, it was in the kitchen drawer Tuesday night. It's gone now. You're the only one who comes in and out of this house whenever you want. If you're new here, welcome to the Quiet Rise. I share true stories about the moments that quietly break us and the moments that just as quietly put us back together. If stories like that speak to you, stick around, because there's a new one every week. Now, back to that kitchen and the $500 and the sentence that was about to end a piece of my relationship with my son. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I raised Marcus by myself for 4 years after his mother, my late wife Carol, passed from cancer when he was 14. I worked 2 jobs. I drove a forklift at a warehouse from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, and then I stocked shelves at a hardware store until closing. I never missed a single football game. I never missed a birthday. When he needed a suit for his high school graduation, I sold my motorcycle to buy it, and I never told him that until years later. And even then, I only told him because Carol's sister let it slip at a family barbecue. So when my only son stood in his kitchen and accused me of stealing $500, something inside my chest went cold in a way I hadn't felt since the day the doctor told us about Carol's diagnosis. "I didn't take your money," I said. My voice came out quieter than I wanted it to. "I haven't been in this house since Sunday." "You were here Monday," Denise said softly, still not looking at me. "You came by to fix the garbage disposal." That was true. I had come by Monday afternoon. Lily, my granddaughter, had called me crying because the disposal was jammed and her mother was at work and her father was, according to Lily, busy in the garage again. I drove 15 minutes with my toolbox, fixed the disposal in under 10 minutes, kissed my granddaughter on the top of her head, and left. I never went near the kitchen drawer. I didn't even know there was an envelope of cash in that drawer. "I was here for maybe 20 minutes, I said. "I fixed the disposal." "Aske Lily." Everyone turned to look at my granddaughter, who was sitting at the dinner table with her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Lily is 8 years old. She has Carol's eyes, the same soft brown color, and when she's nervous, she does this thing where she presses her lips together and looks down at her lap. She was doing that now. "Lily, baby," I said gently, "tell your dad I just fixed the sink, right?" I didn't go near anything else. She didn't answer right away. She looked at her father, then at her mother, then back down at her plate. That silence lasted maybe for seconds, but I promise you, it felt like an hour. Something was wrong. My granddaughter, who normally couldn't stop talking to me about her school project, or her soccer team, or the book she was reading, had gone completely quiet, and she wouldn't look at me. "Lily," Marcus said, his voice sharper now. "Did Grandpa go near the kitchen drawer?" "I don't remember," she whispered. That answer hit me harder than the accusation itself. Not because I thought my granddaughter was lying about me. I knew, somewhere deep in my gut, that this 80-year-old girl was protecting someone, and it terrified me to think about who that might be, and why she felt like she had to. Marcus rubbed his hands over his face, and for a moment I saw something underneath the anger. Exhaustion. Real, bone-deep exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from one bad week. It comes from months of carrying something heavy and not telling anyone. "Dad, I need that money back," he said. "The landlord is coming Friday. If I don't have it, we're 2 months behind, and he's already said if we're late again, he's starting eviction paperwork." That was the first time I understood how serious this actually was. This wasn't about $500. This was about my son and his family, potentially losing their home. And somehow, in his mind, the only explanation that made sense was that his own father had walked into his kitchen and stolen from him. "Marcus," I said, "I would never do that to you. Never. You know that?" "I don't know what I know anymore," he said. And he walked out of the kitchen and into the garage, and I heard the door shut hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. Denise finally looked at me. There were tears in her eyes, but there was also something guarded there. Something that told me she wasn't entirely on my side either. "Robert," she said, using my first name instead of Dad, which she almost never did. "I'm not saying you did it, but someone did, and it wasn't me. And it definitely wasn't an 8. I drove home that night, with my hands gripping the wheel so tight, my knuckles went white. I live in a small guest house behind Marcus and Denise's property. The same guest house I moved into 2 years ago after I sold my own home. It made sense, at the time. I could help with Lily after school. I could be close if anyone needed anything. And honestly, after Carol died, I didn't want to rattle around in an empty house by myself for the rest of my life. I wanted to be near my family. That night, sitting alone in that guest house, I kept replaying Lily's face. The way she pressed her lips together. The way she said, "I don't remember," in a voice that clearly remembered something. I didn't sleep more than 2 hours. The next morning, I sat on my small back porch with a cup of coffee, and I watched Marcus leave for work through the gap in the fence. He didn't look my way. Then, about 20 minutes later, I heard the screen door creak, and I turned to see Lily standing at the edge of the yard in her school uniform, her backpack slung over one shoulder, looking at me like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the courage. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice light. "You're gonna miss the bus." She walked closer, glancing back at the house behind her like she was checking whether anyone was watching. "Grandpa," she said, "I have to tell you something, but you can't tell Daddy. I told you." My heart started pounding. "Okay," I said carefully. "I'm listening." She leaned in close, and in a whisper so small I almost didn't catch it, she said, "I saw Daddy put the envelope in his backpack." "Not you." "Daddy took it." And then he told me if anyone asked, I should say I didn't see anything. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The porch, the coffee cup in my hand, the morning sun, all of it seemed to tilt sideways. My son had not only taken the money himself, he had asked his 8-year-old daughter to lie for him, and then he had let that lie fall on me instead. "Are you sure, baby?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't want you to get in trouble, Grandpa. But I didn't want to lie either. I don't know what to do." I pulled her into a hug right there in the yard, and I told her the truest thing I knew how to tell her. "You did the right thing, telling me. You never have to lie for anybody. Not even people you love. Especially not people you love. Now go on. You'll miss your bus, and let me handle this. Okay? I promise I won't say you told me." She hugged me tighter than usual before she ran off toward the bus stop, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, and I sat back down on that porch step with my coffee going cold in my hands, trying to figure out what in the world was happening to my son. I want to pause here and tell you a little more about Marcus, because I think it matters for understanding what came next. My son is not a bad man. He's a hard worker. He's been a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm for almost 9 years. He coaches Lily's soccer team on weekends. He calls me every Sunday, without fail, just to check in. This wasn't a man with a history of lying or stealing. Something had changed in him, and I needed to understand what, before I confronted him, because accusing him the same way he'd accused me wasn't going to fix anything. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old friend, Walter, a retired police detective I'd known since we were both young fathers coaching Little League together. Walter had a way of seeing through things that most people missed. "Bob," he said, after I explained the situation, "before you go accusing your son of anything, I want you to think about what kind of pressure makes a good man do something out of character. Money problems don't usually come out of nowhere. There's almost always something underneath it. Debt, an addiction, something he's ashamed of." Those words sat with me for the rest of the day. That evening, I decided I wasn't going to confront Marcus directly. Not yet. Instead, I was going to pay closer attention. I started noticing things I hadn't let myself notice before. The way Marcus had been spending more and more time out in the garage, with the door locked. The way his phone buzzed constantly during dinner, and the way his face would tighten every single time he checked it. The way he'd sold his old truck 6 months ago and told everyone it was because he wanted something more fuel efficient, even though the new car he bought was barely any different in price or mileage. 3 days after Lily's whispered confession, I got my answer, though not in the way I expected. I was walking past the garage to grab a hose that had rolled into their yard, and the side door was cracked open. I heard Marcus's voice, low and desperate, talking to someone on the phone. "I told you, I'm good for it. I just need until the 15th. Please, man, don't call the house again. My wife doesn't know." I froze in place, my hand on the hose, my heart hammering. "My wife doesn't know" is not a sentence a man says about a normal bill. I stood there and listened, feeling like a spy in my own family's backyard. But I needed to know. "It's not a big deal," Marcus continued, his voice cracking slightly. "It's just a bad run. I'll win it back. I always win it back eventually." I let the hose fall out of my hand, and the sound must have carried, because the garage went silent for a second before the door creaked open the rest of the way and Marcus stepped out, his face pale. "Dad," he said, "what are you doing out here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, and I didn't bother hiding what I'd heard. "Marcus, are you gambling?" His face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, denial, shame, anger, and finally, exhaustion again. That same bone-deep tired look from the kitchen 3 nights before. He sat down hard on the step outside the garage door, put his elbows on his knees, and put his face in his hands. It started small, he said, his voice muffled. Online poker. Just something to unwind after work. Then it turned into betting on games. Then it turned into something I couldn't stop even when I wanted to. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. Dad, I owe almost $11,000. I took the rent money because I thought if I put it into one more hand, I could win enough to cover everything and nobody would ever have to know. I sat down next to him on that step, my knees aching from the effort, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. You let Lily lie for you, I finally said, and that seemed to hurt him more than anything else I could have said. You let your 8-year-old carry that secret, and you let it fall on me instead. I know, he whispered. I know, Dad. I panicked. I saw the money was gone, and I knew if Denise found out, she'd leave. She's already threatened to leave twice this year because of the late bills. I couldn't tell her the truth, so when you came by Monday, it just felt like the easiest lie to tell. I told myself you'd understand eventually, that we'd figure it out as a family, and I hated myself the entire time I was saying it. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't simple. Part of me was furious. Part of me wanted to walk away and let him sit in the mess he'd made, but a bigger part of me remembered being 28 years old, with a newborn and a wife who'd just been diagnosed with cancer, and how desperate a person can become when they feel like they're drowning and don't know how to ask for help without losing everyone's respect. Does Denise know how much you owe? I asked. No, he said. She knows we're behind on rent. She doesn't know why. She's going to have to know, I said. All of it. Tonight. He shook his head immediately, panic flashing across his face. Dad, she'll leave. I know she will. Marcus, I said, she married a man who tells her the truth, even when it's hard. If you keep hiding this, you're not protecting your marriage. You're slowly killing it, one lie at a time. And eventually there won't be anything left to save. I watched your mother fight for every single day she had left. I am not about to watch you throw away your family over a secret that's eating you alive. It created then the kind of crying a grown man does when he's been holding something in for far too long. And I put my arm around him the way I used to when he was a boy and had a nightmare. And we sat there on that garage step until the sun started going down. That night, the four of us sat in the living room. Marcus told Denise everything. The online poker that turned into sports betting, the $11,000 in debt spread across 3 different apps, and a payday loan he'd taken out under a fake email so it wouldn't show up on their joint accounts. The $500 he'd taken from the drawer and lost within an hour, trying to chase a bet that had already gone bad. And finally, the hardest part, that he'd asked Lily to lie, and that he'd let me take the blame instead of admitting the truth. Denise didn't scream. She didn't storm out. She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment before she spoke. I've known something was wrong for months, she said. I just didn't want to believe it was this. I kept telling myself it was work stress. She looked at him, her eyes hard but not without love, which surprised me more than anything else that night. You let your father, a 68-year-old man who has done nothing but help this family for years, take the fall for something you did. That's what I can't get past right now. Not the money. T'es lié? I know, Marcus said. I know, and I'm sorry. I'll apologize to him properly. I'll apologize to Lily. I never should have asked her to carry that. Lily, who had been sitting quietly on the couch through the entire conversation, spoke up in a small voice. I didn't like lying, Daddy. It made my stomach hurt. That sentence coming from an 8-year-old seemed to break something open in Marcus that all the adult conversation hadn't managed to touch. He got down on his knees in front of his daughter and told her he was sorry, that he never should have put her in that position, that a parent's job is to protect their child from hard things, not use them to hide from the truth, and that he was going to do better, starting now. Over the next several weeks, things did not fix themselves overnight, and I think it's important to tell you that, honestly, because too many stories like this wrap up too fast and too clean. Marcus and Denise sat down with a financial counselor at a local credit union, someone recommended by Walter, and they laid out every debt, every account, every hidden expense. It was ugly. There was a payday loan with an interest rate that made my stomach turn. There were 3 different betting apps he'd downloaded and deleted and downloaded again over the past year. Denise cried more than once during those meetings, and there were nights I heard raised voices drifting from their house across the yard. Nights I sat on my porch and wondered if I should go over there or give them space to work through it themselves. Most nights, I chose to give them space, but I made sure to leave my porch light on, so they'd know I was close if they needed me. Marcus started attending a gambling addiction support group that met twice a week at a community center about 20 minutes from the house. He hated it at first. He told me after the second meeting that he felt like a fraud sitting in a circle of chairs, admitting he had a problem. That part of him still believed he could have won it all back if he'd just had one more chance. That's the thing about an addiction like that. It doesn't let go easily, and it convinces you that the very thing hurting you is also the thing that will save you. I offered to help with the rent while they worked things out with a repayment plan for the debt, not because I had a lot of extra money sitting around, but because I had savings set aside for emergencies. And I couldn't think of a more important emergency than my son's family staying together and healthy. Marcus resisted at first. He said he'd already taken enough from me, that he didn't deserve any more help after what he'd done. Marcus, I told him, you're my son. Helping you isn't about what you deserve. It's about what family does. But I need you to understand something. This isn't a blank check. This is a bridge, not a rescue. You're going to pay me back, a little at a time, once you're steady again. And more importantly, you're going to keep showing up to that group, and you're going to keep being honest with Denise, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. He agreed, and to his credit, he held to it. There were setbacks. About 6 weeks in, he told me he'd almost opened one of the betting apps again during a stressful night at work, and instead of doing it, he called his sponsor from the support group and talked himself down. He told me that story with a kind of pride I hadn't seen in him in months, and I told him that resisting the urge and telling someone about it was a bigger victory than he probably realized. Lily, for her part, seemed to relax more with each passing week. Kids notice more than we give them credit for. She noticed her parents talking softer to each other again instead of the clipped, tense conversations that had filled their house before. She noticed her father coming home earlier instead of disappearing into the garage every night. One afternoon, about 2 months after that terrible dinner, she came running across the yard to my porch with a piece of paper in her hand. "Grandpa! Look what I made in school," she said. "Out of brat." It was a drawing of our family, stick figures holding hands in front of 2 houses connected by a little dotted path, which I realized was meant to be the walkway between the main house and my guest house. Above it, in careful 80-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "My family always tells the truth now." I had to turn away from her for a second so she wouldn't see me wipe my eyes. I think about that dinner sometimes, the one where Marcus stood in his kitchen and accused me of stealing from him. I think about how easy it would have been for me to let anger win that night, to storm out and not come back, to let pride keep me from ever asking the harder questions about what was really going on with my son. I think about how close we came to losing something we couldn't have gotten back, all because of $500 and a secret that had grown too heavy for one man to carry alone. I also think about Lily, and how much courage it took for an 8-year-old girl to walk up to her grandfather on a random Tuesday morning and whisper the truth, even though she'd been told not to. Kids understand fairness, in a way adults sometimes forget. She knew it wasn't right for me to take the blame for something I didn't do, and she knew it wasn't right for her father to ask her to lie. And even though she was scared, she chose honesty. If an 8-year-old can find that kind of courage, I figured the rest of us don't have much of an excuse. It's been almost a year now since that night. Marcus is still in his support group. He hasn't placed a single bet since, and he talks about it openly now. Not with shame, but with the kind of honesty that comes from someone who's fought hard for something and won, at least for today, because that's how he describes it. One day at a time, the debt is almost paid off. Denise still checks in on him more than she used to, not out of suspicion, but out of care, the way you check on someone recovering from any serious illness. They go to couples counseling once a month, something neither of them would have considered before all this happened, and Marcus told me recently it's been some of the most honest conversation they've had in years. As for me, I still live in the little guest house behind their property. Some nights, Lily still runs across the yard in her pajamas just to say goodnight before bed. Last week, she asked me if I remembered the morning she told me the truth on the porch. I told her I remembered every second of it. "I was really scared," she said, "but I'm glad I told you." "So am I, sweetheart," I said. I've thought a lot about what I would have done if Lily hadn't found the courage to say something. Would I have let the accusation sit between me and my son forever? A quiet wound that never healed? Would Marcus have kept sinking deeper into debt until there was nothing left to save? I don't know the answer. And honestly, I'm grateful I never had to find out. If you were in my position, sitting in that kitchen, hearing your own child accuse you of something you didn't do, I want to know honestly what you would have done. Would you have walked away? Would you have pushed harder for the truth right there at the table? Let me know in the comments, because I think stories like this only mean something when we talk about them honestly together. If this story moved you, or if it reminded you of someone in your own life who's carrying a secret too heavy to hold alone, share it with them. Sometimes the smallest act, a shared video, a quiet conversation, an honest question asked at the right moment, is enough to change the direction of someone's whole life. Thank you for spending time with The Quiet Rise. I'll see you in the next story.